Morgan Peckma, Editor-in-Chief of City and State. In today's Last Look, we present excerpts from our recent conference, State of Emergency, featuring upstate leaders talking about the financial struggles their municipalities face and what needs to be done in the future. We hope you enjoy. What can we do as a state to untie your hands and alleviate some of the problems that you face?
Well, let me just say that, you know, when you talk about state unfunded mandates, it's a term of art. And really for municipalities and cities, when we talk about unfunded mandates, what we really mean is policies that Albany is dictating but not paying for. So one way we could consider is pensions, because we don't have any control over pensions. We don't set the contribution level. We don't set how old people are when they retire. We don't set any of that, yet we get the bill from the comptroller's office. Part of what first we need is to recognize that we have a burgeoning problem, and then say we don't want our cities to become Detroit or Stockton or San Bernardino.
So I would suggest that one of the first things that we need to look at is the fact that we at local level and the state are indeed partners, that what one of us is doing in terms of taxes affects what the other is doing in terms of taxes. What one of us is doing in terms of economic development affects the economic development of the other. And then use that type of attitude to look at all of what decisions are made at Albany as it affects the local level.
So as we look to develop things like public-private partnerships and things and be able to take on some of the most innovative changes, I think the environment is ripe for innovation in ways that we have never seen. It's ripe in two places. It's ripe at the local level like it has always been ripe at the local level. I think local officials want to be able to make significant changes. And I think it's ripe at the state level as well, because what did Rahm Emanuel say? This is not a good time to waste a good crisis. We clearly have arrived at that place where there clearly is a crisis.
And you see a disconnect between what the finance industry wants and what the people you represent want. Because if you go to a Moody's or an S&P or a Fitch, they want to see municipal governments raise their property tax. There's a reoccurring revenue that helps pay for your budgets and therefore gives you a higher credit rating. Where of course, if you talk to the voters, the last thing they want to see is higher property taxes. I say that because in Erie County, for the last 10 to 15 years, the community's made a conscious decision to have one of the lowest property taxes, but also have one of the highest sales taxes. If we had the entire contribution that the county provides for Medicaid taken over by New York State, we could eliminate our entire property tax, because we actually spend more money in Erie County on Medicaid than we do and we take in our property tax.
When you make a commitment to provide a certain level of services, understand that whether the state is paying for a portion of those services or the county is paying for a portion of those services, it's still coming out of the same pockets from me, the taxpayer. Whether I'm taking it out of my state tax pocket or my local tax pocket, it's still coming out of that same jacket, same set of pants, that same purse. And so we need to be mindful of the overall costs of these programs and try and be realistic about what we can spend altogether.
I think long-term planning, especially financial plans, as the county executive noted, is something every community should be required to have, whether they have a control board or not. Because you may be able to see that, yes, we can get through this year, but if you look out to the second, third, and fourth out year, you immediately find the problems. If we did not have the 4-year financial plan, we would really not have a good idea of what our health care costs are going to be 3-4 years down the line. And we know within a 4 to 5 year period, the cost for our retirees' health care is actually going to be greater than the cost for our current employees' health care. And how do you solve that problem? You don't. Because by law, they get that health care, truthfully, until they die. So then you start looking at actuarial tables and figure out how much it's going to cost me over the next 5 to 10 years on health care. And the numbers are staggering.
I think if the state took the time to sit down and talk with us at the local level about what we're doing and how it is that we're saving money, and look to see how that could be implemented on a broader basis, we would all be the beneficiaries of that.
Does an assembly member or senator from Manhattan or Bronx really understand the issues that I have in Erie County? That's just the way that New York State's set up. I'm not being especially critical of that person, but I understand. You go to the assembly, you're to represent your assembly district. You're not to worry about what's happening in Buffalo or Cheektowaga. because you're there to represent your assembly district. But in the end, the decisions that assembly member or that senator makes are going to have a direct impact on what happens in Buffalo and Cheektowaga, New York. And so I think we just have to have better lines of communication so truthfully they understand. And I would love to have more of those assembly members and senators come up to Buffalo and see what we're dealing with.
I can speak to a very localized level. Ulster County has reduced the size of its workforce, or is in the process of reducing the size of its workforce by over a third. Imagine over a third of the workforce being reduced, okay? Still with the same obligations, if not more, for service delivery. And we've utilized technology in Department of Public Works. We've entered into public-private partnerships when it comes to how we deliver mental health services to children and adults. And we've entered into, again, this unique method, what we refer to as a compassionate alternative to closure for our nursing home. And in this process, we've restructured and moved towards sustainability. But sustainability is going to be done through more creative ideas across the board. And again, without a real true partnership, not just with the state, and that is going to be critically important, but breaking down those barriers. I'll give you a quick idea. There is a BOCES program in many upstate communities. They're a centralized portion of the education side of our opportunities. They really work with all of the school districts in a community. They run IT programs. Communities, like counties, obviously have the opportunity to be able to run IT programs too. They are precluded by law from coordinating. Now that law, by the way, was put in place, this is arcane rules and regulations, before there were computers in place. It's literally absurd.
So I've been working closely with the county executive. We have this great idea that we're going to put in an IT system, and our vision is that we'll have one bill-paying personnel human resources department that will figure out all of the paychecks and who gets paid, and it will be available to every government in Onondaga County. And the idea is that instead of having every government have 3 or 4 or 5 people in charge of personnel costs and paying bills, that we'll have one department eventually of maybe 5 people with all of the technology. Now, the Syracuse's IT department is probably 1 or 2 steps above a gerbil with a couple of rubber bands. I mean, it's bad. Because money has been so tight, it's gone to other things. So now we say, okay, well, there's been a revolution in technology that's going to help us become much more efficient. We can implement this. We want to do this. This is going to save the people of our community money. And so we say, all right, well, we think it's going to cost us between $5 million, what we estimate. Then you always know with technology it's going to cost you more. So we want to bond for it. So what aren't we going to bond for? Am I not going to bond for pools in our parks because they're 10 years past their maintenance? Am I not going to bond for police and fire cars for 2 or 3 years, because we're not spending $5 to $7 million a year on police and fire cars? Am I not going to spend for maintenance on the buildings? Then you say, well, maybe this is the kind of idea that it would help to go to the state and say, look, the upfront costs are big, but over the return on that investment is going to be huge. And also, this is one of those ways, because we have an aging workforce upstate, that we can do it through attrition, so there's going to be less pain. Looks like a really, all things put together, a win-win. And the state says, you know, what we have available for that kind of shared services or consolidation agreement is at $1 million. $1 million isn't going to help us. And so, as a mayor, as a county executive, those are the kind of choices you have to make or figure out how to make, because you know in the long term, this investment in technology is going to help you, that return on that investment. But, you know, the famous economist said, in the long term, we're all dead.